Welcome to Season 10, Episode 6 of My Words Our Journey, the podcast, When Ink Doesn't Run. I'm Monty, your host and author. As a refresher, Ink has found a blouse and also a cell phone that Grace feels will help identify the killer. Ink is doing its best to balance two very different relationships. Let's continue the journey today. Chapter 26, The Stars. The stage was set by the time he got there. Bob was placing a wireless speaker on a side table. As they were shaking hands, he could hear laughter on the other side of the RV. Bob said, "Grab whatever you like and go around. The kids are playing lawn dominoes." Lawn dominoes, Ink thought. He had no idea what to expect. Presley saw him and came running over. "Yay, you made it." Ink took notice of the Green Bay jersey she was wearing, number 21. Charles Woodson. Ink had read about the Michigan great. He had also read up on Reggie White, who wore number 92, the two numbers that together opened the cell phone. There could be a simple explanation, he thought, as Presley explained the new game. For the next few hours, he laughed, ate a couple of great cheeseburgers, and enjoyed Presley, her family, and their friends. Bob had made his way out. He was telling old stories about when he and his friends ruled the RV park during the summers. He was a great storyteller. Ink guessed he was good at his job, too. Who wouldn't like him and trust this guy? Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. Presley had gone inside to help her mom with something that they had planned for the next day. Bob sat down, had two cold beers in his hand, passed one to Ink and said, "Having a good time?" "Yes, sir, Bob." "Good. Glad to hear it. I want to talk to you about something if it's okay." "Sure." "Good. I've been told that someone's been messing around with what the young folks like to call the boat burial ground. You don't know anything about that, do you?" "No, sir. Bob. Haven't heard anything about it. Was there vandalism or anything stolen?" Presley's dad sat back, as if he was picking his words carefully. "Vandalism? No. Not that I'm aware of. But it's dangerous over there. Snakes. Sharp edges just waiting to hurt someone snooping around where they shouldn't be." Ink was the opposite of worldly, but it just felt off the way he was speaking to him. Not so much out of concern for his safety, but more, he just couldn't put his finger on it. Then Bob clarified. "I guess what I'm saying is, I'd be disappointed if I found out it was you that was hanging out over there, Ink. But we don't have to cross that bridge. Right?" "Right, Bob." Presley's timing could not have been more perfect. "Mom said she needs you to help cut up the watermelon for tomorrow, Dad." "Okay, good. She knows I like to carve it just right. Well, good night, kids. We're trusting you to be on your best behavior. Anyone could come walking by or come out of their RV at any time. Right, boys?" "Yes, sir," in unison. "Good. I think we understand each other. Enjoy the stars." Presley was again in charge of the music. "Everyone, let's enjoy some Pink Floyd. And remember, someone can walk by or jump out of their RV at any moment." There were a few laughs. Presley laid back next to him. They held hands and just watched the stars. He could tell she was about to fall asleep. They kissed, said goodnight, and she fell asleep listening to the Division Bell album. Presley had told him the album had come out in 1994, and while it wasn't their most popular, she still enjoyed it. He could see why. He listened for a while longer, staring at the wondrous stars. What was he meant to do? He was just a kid. Just a kid that was trying to solve a murder. He'd have to spend some more time with Grace going through the phone. He needed to find anything that would show that Bob nor his family had anything to do with this whole mess. The last song he heard before he fell asleep was entitled High Hopes. High Hopes. Chapter 27. Wednesday, June 17th, 1991. The following morning, he was up and gone. The others still fast asleep. Pink Floyd still played. He thought he heard something coming from the RV, but he couldn't be sure. The park was sleeping for the most part. A couple of dogs being let out, a girl being prepped for a big breakfast. He would have a couple hours before he had to be at work. Nancy had liked how he had trimmed, so she'd asked him to do it again this week. Ink wasn't looking forward to it, but it was good exercise, and he got to enjoy being outside. So, Grace met him at the top of the stairs. The greeting was not friendly, but he thought he heard a hint of appreciation. He'd take that. Together, they started with the newest text and worked backwards. For the most part, it was boy talk. Sports, girls, talking about boats, fishing, more sports, a lot more girl talk. And when those topics were worn out, they'd go back to boats and jet skis. From the reading of the text, it seems the boys were a little girl and sports-crazy teens that liked their parents' expensive toys. Bob had a large group of friends, boy and girl. Then, they found a new group that had been created. There was an ebb and flow amongst the group, which consisted of the one that owned the phone. The profile was empty, probably deleted. But why delete the profile, but not completely destroy the phone? Grace was calling him, affectionately, Bob. Then there was a Dusty, Cameron, Nick, and George. The texts were shorter, pointed, Ink would say later. Simple one-word responses to vague questions. On Monday, June 17th, 1991. The words jumped off the screen. Grace had become silent. Ink looked at the text exchange one more time. We stick together. We good? What's done is done. That was 9:47 p.m. on the 18th. Everyone cool? Yes or yeah was the answer from each friend. Nothing until the following Sunday. Church was tough. Yeah, brutal. Can't go through that again. We still good? All yeses. Grace still silent as he scrolled. Then he asked, Grace, what day did you and Sybil... Well, what day were you murdered? He had done his research. He knew the answer. Wednesday, June 17th, 1991. Shortly after 6 p.m. Well, it seems like we might have some good suspects. Out of nowhere, he heard her voice. Ink? You have a guest? Should I be worried? Presley did not wait for an answer. She was in the treehouse before he could even think about putting anything away. Now, with her in the tiny space, there was no hiding the news articles, the phone, the legal pad with the names of the boys. He sat in silence as she worked her way around the room. Finally, her first question. You were just talking to a Grace. The young girl in the article. One of them's named Grace. What's going on? Chapter 28. Honesty may be the wrong policy. Presley peppered him with questions. He understood. Her timing could not have been worse. It had been somewhat exploratory until she picked up the legal pad with Bob written in big letters and circled several times. This was all new to him. Relationships, murder, a girl in his treehouse yelling at him. And not once did Grace come to his defense. Not a peep. Ink waited until she was done yelling and about to leave when he said, Can I tell you from the beginning? Sure. I'll be able to tell if you're lying. Good, then give me just a couple minutes, your full attention. Then if you have to go, you have to go. He spent the next several minutes, starting from the beginning. First visit at the treehouse, until she walked in on him and Grace. He left nothing out. Even the part about liking her so much that he had prayed that her family would have nothing to do with this. When he was done, she stood, walked towards the door, stopped, turned, and calmly said, I hope you're happy with the voice in your head. Stay away from my family and friends. Nancy will be my first stop, and I'm sure you won't be needed at the general store rest of the season. He was devastated by her reaction. Devastated. Should he have gone after her? And said what? Thank you, Grace. Thank you for stepping in and helping me. Now, I've lost the job I love. A girl I liked a lot. Her family, her friends. After a couple minutes of feeling sorry for himself, he just got up and started heading to the RV park. He hadn't lost his job until Nancy said he had. That came a short time later. Presley had walked right past the swing on the porch without making eye contact. Nancy was surprised to see him by the look on her face. Nancy bit her lower lip and spoke. "Ink, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, blood is thicker than water. I'm really not sure what it means in the big scheme of things, but in this small part of the country, blood is thicker than, well, just about anything. I'm really sorry. I truly am. I just can't have you working here with all this going on." "I understand, Miss Nancy. I just wanted to not show up for work, you know." "Yes, I know. Let me get your last monies together while you're here. I'll also call around to the other parks and see if any of them need anyone to help get through this last part of the season, if that's okay." "That would be very nice, Miss Nancy. Thank you." As he was turning to leave, Bob walked through the door. The look on his face told Ink all he needed to know. He just wanted to leave. "Bob, Ink was just on his way out. He just came by to make sure I didn't need anything, and I don't. So he won't be coming around anymore. Now let's not make matters worse." Bob stared at his sister for a brief moment, then to Ink. "Let me walk you to the edge of the road." There was silence for a few steps. Then Bob broke it. "Can you tell me what the heck is going on?" Ink repeated his story. From the beginning, right up until the moment they were standing next to the road. "So I just want to make sure I understand. You think me and some of my friends killed 2 girls back in the 90s. Is that what I'm hearing? You and a ghost are trying to prove that I committed murder." "Mr. Childs, Bob, I don't know what to think. It was then that they both heard the sirens and turned to see the fire truck turning towards the billowing smoke. It looked like it was coming from the direction of the treehouse. Ink began to run." Chapter 29. Not okay. All he could do was watch from across the street. It wasn't his property. He was trespassing after all. Only one person in his life had known where the treehouse was. His home. She or somebody close to her had taken his home, knowing he'd be back on the street. Had they been trying to destroy the evidence? Maybe take away his home and his job. Maybe then they thought he'd move on. Or had they been trying to hurt him? Could be all of the above, he decided. Feeling sorry for himself, he noticed Presley and her dad across the street. They were talking to one of the firemen. Their eyes met for the briefest of seconds. He could hear her calling for him as he began to run, fast. Maybe faster than he ever had. As he ran, Grace spoke a simple phrase. "I'm sorry." He was too. He couldn't go back to where he first slept when he arrived in Adams Landing. He had shown Presley the area. Now it wouldn't be safe. His brain couldn't process how things had gone so wrong, how he had gone so wrong. His legs gave out on the far side of the lake. Not nearly halfway, but it was far. He sat, caught his breath, took his backpack, and took inventory of what he hadn't lost. His notepad, the cell phone, and the cord, the news articles, the walkie-talkie, his favorite shorts and t-shirt, all lay before him. He had lost small things maybe to others, but to him they were big. He lost the money he'd been saving, his jacket, and most of all, his safe space. He was starting over. He felt more lost than he had in a while. Grace spoke in a soft and soothing voice. "You're safe here." He looked around. The tree he was under was full and would hold back water if it rained. The lake was close. He remembered something and dug deep in the deepest corner of his backpack. There, his fingers touched what he had been hoping to find, a chocolate chip protein bar. He would have half now and half in the morning, at which time he'd reevaluate his situation. The night was less sleep and more restlessness. The sleep came at a cost. Visions of the burning tree. Not only his home, but the wildlife that took advantage of the enormous oak, he thought, before the fire was set. Who set the fire? Presley? No, she wouldn't do that. But who had she told? Did she know what they were going to do? He was somewhere between sleep and not when Grace scared him to death by speaking, "Someone is coming." He had hidden the backpack in case this happened. Ink sat up, looked in all directions. Then he saw the flashlight. There was nowhere for him to hide. Then he heard his friend's voice. "Ink, is that you? Ink? It's me, Merkel." Ink's guard and blood pressure fell instantly. He ran to his friend and gave him a big hug. He always smelled like his grill. Tonight was no exception. "Are you okay?" "No." "I understand. That's why I'm here." They sat, quiet for a moment. Then, "First things first, a couple of my dogs. Just the way you like them. Should still be warm-ish." Nothing better than his dogs. "Tell me what's going on and how I can help." So again, he told his story, leaving almost nothing out. When he finished, Merkel sat back and thought for a minute. "Okay, so all your evidence was lost in the fire. How do I help you, son?" The hot dogs were a big help. "Do you know anybody at any of the other parks that could use some help rest of the season?" All my savings were lost. Merkel promised he'd ask around at the other campgrounds, gave him 2 20s, and said he'd come check on him the following evening, maybe bring him a couple of hot dogs. No, he remembered tomorrow was burger night. He'd bring him a couple burgers the following evening. When he was gone, Grace said, "Why did you lie to him about the evidence hidden in the bag in the tree?" "I don't know, Grace. I don't feel I can trust anyone, except for you. Just because he's great with a grill doesn't mean he couldn't be dishonest. At this point, I just don't know." Chapter 30. Bob, Meet Grace. The following day, Ink walked past the street in front of the home where the tree had burned. There was yellow caution tape. The smell of burnt timber still filled the air for 100 yards in each direction. As he passed, he was surprised to see Mr. Childs, Bob's golf cart, resting off the side of the road. It was hard to miss. Gold, white, dark green. Then from behind, "Ink, wait! I want to talk to you." When he turned, Bob was running towards him, his dog Vince by his side. Vince had no enemies, so he ran straight to Ink as soon as he saw him. Bob followed, as Ink rubbed the dog's ear. "You okay?" "I don't know." "I understand." "Can you tell me what's going on? I heard everything from Presley, and I know, but she really likes you, and I think her version may be slanted. I just want to know what's going on." Ink was a little frustrated. He had already gone through this once. But they moved the golf cart into the shade, and he repeated his story, telling everything except for the evidence being in the stacked and hidden. When he was done, Bob made a humming noise, then said, "So the phone, it was found inside of one of my family's jet skis. You're sure?" "The phone, you think it was mine? The way you describe it, the code for you to get in." "I know this is a lot to process, but if I hurt someone, why would I hide the evidence on my property? Even if I thought it wouldn't be found there, why wouldn't I just get rid of it? Throw it in the lake, the trash?" "I don't know, sir. Those texts, I don't remember those texts. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what they mean, but I can promise you they had nothing to do with murder." Ink must not have been able to hide his distrust. "I understand," Bob said. "Now this voice. Tell me about this Grace." He was the first person that actually seemed genuinely interested in hearing about Grace. He told him the little bit he knew, dates, family. It wasn't much, but he shared. He explained he wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was just trying to help if he could, for Grace and for Sybil. Bob had listened intently, then said something that took Ink back a bit. "I believe in the afterlife. I don't understand it by any means, but I do believe the dead can talk to the living if the cause is just. And this sounds like it counts, I reckon." "Will she speak to me?" Ink sat still, knowing Grace was with him. He could sense her. He felt her being conflicted. On one side, if she spoke, she could validate him to some degree. But there was the trust issue. Ink and Bob waited. Then, Grace spoke. He is telling the truth. Bob almost fell off the cart. Ink couldn't help but snicker, even with everything he had going on. Bob regained his composure. Thank you for trusting me, Grace. That means a lot. Answer me a simple question, please. Did you have any part in the death of myself or my sister? Bob stood and said with conviction, No, Grace. I don't know anything about any of this. I do remember hearing about murders back when I was younger, but I was busy chasing girls my own age and finding the next way to be out on the water. To Ink, Grace said, We should go. Bob was left standing with his mouth open as Ink hurried off. When they were safely back, Grace explained why she felt Bob was telling the truth. He was holding back on something. She just wasn't sure what. Like, why had he been at the house? Looking for the remains of the evidence? Looking for Ink? He wasn't sure. He should have asked. Now it bothered him. It bothered him. He wanted it not to be Bob so bad. He knew Presley was just something from his past, but he didn't want to be disappointed by Bob. Somehow, that would hurt him more. He couldn't understand why she reacted the way she did. The story sounded far-fetched, and the fact that her dad was the center of his, whatever it was, he understood. But still, she seemed to react just so crazy. So who burnt down the tree? Who would she have told? Either on purpose or just someone overhearing her conversation with someone else. Nancy? Someone else in her family? From the park? As he thought about it, it could be anyone. Grace said, You need to rest. This is not over, but it may be soon. You'll need your energy. Easier said than done, but he listened and tried. Ink woke when he heard the shots fired. Instinctively, he ran to the nearest tree. It was not the same tree as the day before. He had moved. He was not going to stay in one place very long until this was over. The shots were coming from the area where he had been. He had left what looked like him sleeping on the ground. Clearly, they were taking shots at the leaves and twigs as target practice. Grace said run, and he ran. He could hear dogs at the same time. Him running was becoming a thing, and he just wanted it to stop. He couldn't climb a tree this time. Dogs would track him. So he ran literally until he couldn't run any further. If he was going to keep moving, he would have to go through what he could only guess was deep water, which would mean the evidence would be ruined. That couldn't happen. Can you help me? Grace replied, I will try. Chapter 31. Truth. He stood and waited for whatever would be coming around the corner. He didn't have to wait long. 2 dogs he had met before came running and barking. Cooper and Deuce ran straight to him and began to jump and lick him. They were followed by Merkel, gun over his shoulder. Hey son, you okay? I heard the shots and came as fast as I could. He is lying, Grace confirmed. The man must have seen it in his eyes. He lowered the gun, pointed it towards Ink. I wish that look on your face told me you believe me. I really do. But you just don't have that poker face, kid. Merkel? I just can't believe you had anything to do with this whole thing. What happened? He stood there for a moment, laughed, said, I guess getting it off my chest may do me some good. The story went something like this. He and his friends had been drinking when they came upon the young girls. Merkel was the leader of a small gang. He was mad. All the young people from the RV camps around the area had spent the day, better part of the day on that Sunday, either on the water or on the beach. At some point, Bob had beat him in a jet ski race, and later had started moving in on his girlfriend, as far as Merkel was concerned. He didn't mean for him to die. He just kind of went crazy. They were there, at the right or wrong time, depending on how you looked at it. The first couple of rocks were only meant to scare the girls, but one of them was hit, began to cry, scream. The boys couldn't have that. There were still folks on the lake and around the corner at the picnic tables. The rocks got bigger, and the girls fell. Then 2 large rocks, and the girls stopped making any noise. After that, he continued, it was just survival mode. Flatly, he said, they hid the bodies. They got a boat. They moved the bodies, cleaned the boat. Paranoia set in, the thought of what they had done, and could they go to prison? After a pause, later that night, as if the gods were looking out for the kids, Merkel watched Bob lay his phone down next to a cooler and chased after a frisbee. A quick grab of the phone. He figured Bob would just think he had misplaced it and it'd show up the next day. But the phone and its new text exchange wouldn't be found. That is, until now. Merkel had slowly moved towards him as he told his story. Ink had noticed. He was kneeling, petting the dogs, trying to keep them between him and his would-be killer. The man that had fed him from his grill, the man Ink wanted to grow up to be like someday, whistled, and the 2 dogs ran to his side. A twisted smile crossed his face. I really wish the end of the story was different. I really do. I liked you, kid. Grace to Ink. We are not alone. He had no time to process what that really meant. Merkel was done talking. A small log took the first shot. It had jumped in the air as if a small bomb had gone off underneath. Merkel grunted, took aim. Ink knew he was going to have to do his part. He turned, headed towards the water. Before he could get far, a boat came barreling around the corner, almost running him over. The fact he still had pretty good reflexes, and Bob turned the wheel the opposite direction, kept that from happening. Presley was in the water before her father or Ink could stop her. She was running towards Ink, yelling his name. Dogs were now barking, the boat engine winding down, and then 2 more shots. The bullet hit her in the back as she went to hug Ink. Before either could say a word, she collapsed in his arms. The second shot he heard, but he didn't, if that makes sense. Blood stained the water around the 2 as Ink called her name and looked for help from her father. Bob ran to them. Then he was confused when he heard Nancy calling 911. He would learn later she had fired the second shot, the one that had killed Merkel. Chapter 32. When is it time to walk away? Ink spent most of his time in the waiting room over the next week. He was not family, but strings were pulled so he could see her. Some days a couple times, some days not at all, depending on the nurses and how Presley was feeling. He didn't really understand the medical stuff, but he did understand she was lucky to be alive and not to be paralyzed. Her family had been nice to him. Meals, a pillow. Her mom had brought him a small bag that had a toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant. Bob sat with him, talked a little about the boys, men, where they had been arrested, how one of them had passed away, that sort of thing. Still, there was something, a barrier he couldn't feel. He was alone. They were a family praying for their loved one to come home to them. He was just a guy she met a couple months ago. He didn't like the feeling. Grace hadn't followed him to the hospital. He had tried communicating with her, to no avail. He wanted her there. The waiting room could be full, and he still felt alone. He wrote Presley a long letter, thanking her for the last few months, apologizing that she had been hurt because of him, and wishing her the best. He left it with the nicest of the nurses, along with the items the child's families had loaned him over the last week. That afternoon, Ink walked from the hospital back to the tree where the tree house had stood. Long walk, but he had nothing better to do. He was still unemployed. He understood. Nancy couldn't hire him back. Campers like to gossip almost as much as they like to grill. Again, he called for Grace. No reply. lying in the grass, looking up at the sky. Any smell of the fire or burning wood had left. He heard the car door slam, but paid no mind. If he was asked to leave, he would leave. Otherwise, he was content to lay there and think about things. When he heard her voice, it startled him. Before he could stand, she was trying to sit. Presley looked well, tried to smile as she managed her way to the ground. All he could think to say was, "I'm glad you're okay." She smiled, lowered her head, and said, "Thank you." Then, "I heard you stayed at the hospital all week." "Yeah." "After so long, why'd you pick today to leave a letter and take off?" I guess I felt the time was right. Not really sure. When is it time to walk away?" Your letter was sweet. Things can't go back to the way they were before I walked into the treehouse, can they? Probably not. I was thinking about that when you got here. Silence, neither wanting to say the wrong thing. When an excited Bob walked over, still on the phone, Ink could feel the energy coming from Presley's father. They watched while he finished his call. They had no idea who he could be talking to or what could be getting him so excited. From an otherwise calm man, he seemed ready to jump out of his shoes. When he finished with the call, Bob exhaled and took a seat between the pair. He had their full attention. "Okay, so I just got off the phone with a friend of mine in the Attorney General's office. It seems that, after the murder of Grace and Sybil, the family put up a reward for the conviction of the murderer or murderers. The town matched that reward, and a couple of the wealthier citizens in the time, they gave as well. That money, it's been sitting in a bank account this whole time, just waiting, drawing interest. That amount is now well over $2 million. Ink sat and listened to the words that were coming out of the adult's mouth, not sure what some of it meant. Bob could tell by the look on the young boy's face. "Ink, that money is yours. You led to the death or conviction of those responsible for the murder of Grace and Sybil. After taxes, you're still going to be a very wealthy young man." Chapter 33. 8 months later. The general store was quiet. It was early, just a touch after 6 a.m. Ink liked to get there early and stock the shelves, clear out the boxes, get his orders ready for the next day. Nancy had left him a note, reminding him to order the special diet chips that Mrs. Dodge, Lot 133, had requested. Nancy was taking the morning off. Over the last couple of months, she had taught Ink how to run the park, as if it was his own, which was good, because the money should be hitting the account Bob had helped him set up any day. Then he'd be purchasing the park from Nancy. She wanted to travel, had saved over the years, and had accepted a below-market price from Ink, with the understanding her RV would stay right where it was, and she could visit anytime she wanted when she wasn't traveling around the world. Nancy and Ink had worked with all the vendors, securing accounts in his name only. Bob had helped with all the legal issues related to the money, the purchase, and some personal items as well. When Nancy, Ink, and Bob took inventory of the property, they had come across a large amount of wood planks in the shadows of one of the workshops. At a glance, it looked like plenty to build a treehouse. So that's exactly what they did. With the help of some of the campers and locals that had heard about the project around town, a wonderful treehouse was built just off to the northeast corner of the park. It had beautiful views, a balcony, and a winding staircase. Ink and Presley decided just to be friends. That lasted 4 days. Presley was staying at their family's RV and taking online courses in business management and accounting. They had plans of running the RV park together, maybe even having a second one day. Grace had come to visit him at the treehouse one evening before it was complete. He had been sitting on the unfinished flooring, watching some young people play basketball. She expressed her and her sister's gratitude for all he had done. At some point, she had hinted she probably wouldn't be coming back. They left it at that. Ink was not prepared to say goodbye. He would rather hold on to the hope that they would talk again. I'm the same way, so let's not say goodbye to Ink. Let's hope we go on another adventure with him someday. The end. I hope you enjoyed When Ink Doesn't Run. And yes, I know he ran a lot. But when it mattered, he kept his promise to Grace. As always, thank you for listening. The support is greatly appreciated. Have a great day.